When her hand touched his trembling fingers in that pottery studio, she asked the question that would change everything. Is it fear? Or something else? Two broken souls were about to discover that the bravest thing you can do is let someone see you shake. He had always lived his life in careful patterns. At 32 years old, he worked as a software developer, spending most of his days staring at computer screens, writing code, fixing bugs, and attending virtual meetings. His life was predictable, safe, and honestly a bit lonely, but that's how he preferred it. Or at least that's what he told himself every morning when he woke up in his small apartment. His therapist had suggested he try something different, something that didn't involve screens or technology. You need to use your hands, she had said during one of their sessions. Do something creative, something real. That's how he ended up signing up for a pottery class at the local community center. Every Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock, he would drive to the old brick building on Maple Street and spend 2 hours working with clay. The class was small, just 8 people. There was an elderly couple who had been making pottery together for decades, a young college student who always wore headphones, a middle-aged man who never talked to anyone, and a few others who came and went. He liked the quiet atmosphere, the way everyone focused on their own work, the way no one asked personal questions or tried to make small talk. For the first 3 weeks, everything was routine. He would arrive exactly on time, take his usual spot at the third wheel from the door and work on his projects. He wasn't particularly good at pottery, but he enjoyed it. There was something calming about shaping the clay, feeling it spin beneath his fingers, watching something take form from nothing. Then she walked in. It was the 4th week of the class, about 20 minutes after the session had started. The door opened and she rushed in, slightly out of breath, apologizing to the instructor. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was still wearing scrubs with a hospital ID badge clipped to her pocket. The instructor smiled and pointed to the empty seat next to him. She sat down quickly, still catching her breath. "Sorry I'm late," she whispered to him as she grabbed an apron from the hook. "Crazy day at work. I'm a nurse and we had an emergency that kept me late." He nodded, not really knowing what to say. He wasn't good at casual conversation, especially with strangers, especially with women. So he just smiled politely and went back to his work, trying to center a lump of clay on his wheel. But then something happened. They both reached for the same wire-cutting tool at the same time. Their hands touched for just a second, barely a moment, but he felt something strange. It wasn't romantic attraction, though he noticed she had kind eyes. It was something different, something he couldn't quite name. Like his body recognized something his mind didn't understand yet. "Sorry," they both said at the same time, then laughed awkwardly. "You take it," she said, pulling her hand back. "I'll wait." Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. They started talking. At first, it was just small comments about their pottery projects or questions about techniques. But gradually, the conversations became longer, more personal. She would arrive late most weeks, always apologizing, always explaining that hospital schedules were unpredictable. He found himself looking forward to Tuesdays in a way he hadn't looked forward to anything in years. She had a way of asking questions that most people didn't ask. Not the usual, "What do you do for work?" or "Where are you from?" questions, but deeper things. She asked him why he always seemed so careful with everything he did, why he apologized so much, why he seemed surprised whenever she laughed at his jokes. She asked about his dreams, his fears, what made him happy. These questions made him uncomfortable at first. He had spent years building walls around himself, keeping people at a safe distance, but she was different. She didn't push when he hesitated, didn't judge when he struggled to find words. She just listened with genuine interest, like she actually cared about the answers. He learned things about her too. She had been a nurse for 7 years, working mostly in the psychiatric ward. She had chosen that specialty for personal reasons, though she didn't explain what those reasons were at first. She lived alone like him. She loved hiking and photography, but rarely had time for either. She had a laugh that made everyone in the room turn and smile. 6 weeks into the class, something shifted. They were cleaning up their workstations at the end of the evening, wiping down the pottery wheels and washing their tools. She was telling him about a photography exhibition opening at a small gallery downtown the following Saturday. One of her friends from nursing school had some photos in the show. "You should come," she said casually, scrubbing clay from under her fingernails. "I mean, If you're interested in that kind of thing. No pressure, his hands started shaking, just slightly at first, but then more noticeably. He tried to steady them by gripping the sponge tighter, but it didn't help. The trembling got worse. His heart started beating faster. His chest felt tight, it was happening again. This feeling he knew too well. This panic that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. She noticed immediately. She always noticed things. She put down her towel and turned to face him. Her expression was concerned but calm, the way nurses look when they're assessing a situation. She reached out and gently placed her hand over his trembling ones. "Hey," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're trembling." He wanted to pull away, to make an excuse, to laugh it off as nothing. But her touch was so gentle, so steady, that he found himself frozen in place. She looked directly into his eyes, not with pity or confusion, but with genuine curiosity and something that felt like understanding. "Is it fear?" she asked quietly. "Or something else?" The question hung in the air between them. The pottery studio had emptied out. The instructor was in the back room cleaning up. They were essentially alone, standing by the sink with her hands still covering his shaking ones. He didn't know how to answer. Was it fear? Yes, partly. He was afraid of getting close to someone again. Afraid of being vulnerable. Afraid of wanting something he might not be able to have. But it was something else too. Something about her made him feel things he had shut down years ago. Hope, maybe, or possibility, or the terrifying realization that his carefully constructed walls were starting to crack. "I don't know," he finally whispered, being honest for maybe the first time in months. Both, maybe. She didn't pull away. She didn't look uncomfortable or scared. She just nodded slowly, like his answer made perfect sense to her. "That's okay," she said. "Being scared is okay. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay." In that moment, standing in a pottery studio that smelled like wet clay and cleaning solution, with fluorescent lights humming overhead and his hands still trembling beneath hers, something began to change. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if he would go to that gallery opening or if he would run away like he usually did when things got too real. But for the first time in a very long time, he wanted to find out. He wanted to be brave enough to see where this might go, even if it terrified him. Maybe especially because it terrified him. "I'll think about it," he said quietly, referring to the gallery invitation. "The exhibition, I mean." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Good," she said. "I hope you come." She let go of his hands and went back to cleaning up, humming softly to herself. He stood there for a moment longer, his hands still trembling but his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. He didn't know it yet. But this was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. Sometimes the most important moments start with the smallest things. A shared pottery class, a touch of hands, a simple question asked with genuine care. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that you're trembling, and let someone see you anyway. He spent the entire week thinking about that gallery opening. Should he go? Shouldn't he? Every morning he would wake up and tell himself he would go. Every evening he would convince himself it was a terrible idea. The anxiety was constant, sitting in his chest like a heavy stone. What she didn't know, what nobody at that pottery class knew, was that he had spent most of his 20s in a relationship that had slowly destroyed him from the inside out. Her name doesn't matter anymore, but what she did to him still mattered very much. It had started so normally. They met at work, began dating, and everything seemed perfect at first. But gradually, so slowly that he didn't even notice it happening, things changed. She started questioning who he spent time with. Then she began checking his phone. Then she insisted on knowing where he was at all times. If he wanted to see his friends, she would get upset, accuse him of not loving her enough, sometimes cry for hours until he canceled his plans. His friends started calling less. Then they stopped calling at all. His family would invite him for dinners and he would make excuses because she didn't like going. And going without her would cause a huge fight that would last for days. Slowly, his world became smaller and smaller until it was just him, her, and the constant feeling that he was always doing something wrong. She would tell him that his feelings were exaggerated, that he was too sensitive, that he was imagining things. When he got upset, she would twist everything around until somehow it became his fault. She monitored his emails, his social media, even his bank account. She convinced him that this was what love looked like. That if he really cared about her, he would understand why she needed to know everything. It took him 3 years to leave that relationship. And it took another 2 years of therapy to even understand what had happened to him. His therapist used words like manipulation and control and emotional harm. She helped him see that what he experienced was real, that his feelings were valid, that he hadn't imagined any of it, but understanding it in his mind didn't make his body forget. The trembling she noticed at the pottery studio wasn't new. It happened whenever someone got too close emotionally. It happened whenever he felt vulnerable. His body remembered the danger even when his mind knew he was safe now. Saturday came. He changed his clothes 3 times. He drove to the gallery, parked, sat in his car for 15 minutes, almost drove home, then finally forced himself to walk inside. The gallery was small but crowded. People stood around holding wine glasses, talking in that sophisticated way people talk at art events. He felt completely out of place in his simple button-down shirt and jeans. Everyone else looked so comfortable, so confident. Then he saw her. She was standing in front of a large black and white photograph, talking to an older woman. She was wearing a simple green dress and her hair was down for the first time since he'd met her. She looked different outside the pottery studio, more relaxed somehow. She spotted him and her whole face lit up. She excused herself and walked over quickly. "You came," she said, and she sounded genuinely happy. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," he admitted, trying to smile despite his racing heart. She took him around the gallery, explaining each photograph, telling him about the photographer who was her friend from nursing school. The photos were beautiful but sad, mostly images of empty hospitals at night, waiting rooms with no one in them, the lonely spaces where people experience their worst moments. When she introduced him to people, she would say, "This is my friend from pottery class," and each time she said it, he felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because friend was safe, manageable. Disappointment because some part of him wanted to be more than that, even though the thought terrified him. About an hour into the event, they found themselves in a quieter corner of the gallery. The crowd had thinned out a bit, and they sat down on a bench in front of a particularly striking photograph of an empty hospital corridor at dawn. That's when she told him something he didn't expect. She started talking about her younger brother, about how he had struggled with depression for years, about how 5 years ago he had taken his own life. She was 25 when it happened, just starting her nursing career. She talked about the guilt she carried, the signs she thought she should have seen, the conversations she wished she'd had. "That's why I became a psychiatric nurse," she said quietly, looking at the photograph instead of at him. "I thought maybe I could help other people the way I couldn't help him. Maybe I could notice the things I missed with him. Maybe I could save someone else's brother or sister or friend." Her voice cracked slightly when she said this, and he saw her blink back tears. But she kept talking, kept sharing this painful part of herself with him. She talked about therapy, about grief support groups, about learning to forgive herself even though some days that still felt impossible. He sat there listening, hardly breathing, amazed by her honesty. She was showing him her broken pieces, trusting him with her pain. And something about her vulnerability made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could share his own. The gallery event ended. People filtered out into the cool night air. They walked to the parking lot together, their footsteps echoing in the quiet street. When they reached their cars, parked a few spaces apart, they both stopped. Neither of them seemed ready to leave yet. "Thank you for telling me about your brother," he said. "That must have been hard to talk about." She nodded. "It was, but I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand why I became a nurse, why I ask the questions I ask, why I notice things like trembling hands." There was a long pause. The street was empty. A distant car alarm was going off somewhere. The moon was bright overhead. And then, standing there in that parking lot, he started talking. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. He told her about his past relationship, about the control and the isolation, about how he lost all his friends and barely spoke to his family anymore, about how she made him feel crazy, like he couldn't trust his own thoughts or feelings. He told her about the checking and the monitoring and the constant accusations, about how he would apologize for things he didn't do just to make the fighting stop, about how small his world became, about how he forgot who he was. He told her about the therapy, about slowly learning what had happened to him, about understanding that it wasn't his fault even though it felt like it was, about how he still struggled to trust people, to open up, to believe that someone could care about him without wanting to control him. He talked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. and she stood there and listened to every word. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix anything, didn't look at him with pity. She just listened with that same calm attention she'd shown in the pottery studio. When he finally finished, when there were no more words left, he felt exhausted and exposed and terrified. He had just told her everything, shown her all his damage, given her every reason to walk away. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the tears in her eyes that matched the ones in his. "Thank you for trusting me," she said simply. "Thank you for telling me, that was all. No grand speeches, no promises, no attempts to fix him. Just acknowledgement and acceptance." They stood there in that parking lot for a few more minutes, not saying much, just being together in their shared vulnerability. Then they said goodnight and drove home separately. But something had changed. They had both opened doors they usually kept locked. They had shown each other their scars, and neither of them had run away. Sometimes healing begins when you find someone brave enough to show you their wounds, and you find the courage to show them yours. After that night in the parking lot, something shifted between them, but it wasn't simple or straightforward. Their friendship deepened in ways that felt both natural and terrifying. He found himself thinking about her constantly. During boring work meetings, while eating lunch alone at his desk, while lying in bed at night unable to sleep. She had become the most important person in his life, and that realization scared him more than anything. He started planning his weeks around Tuesday evenings. Pottery class became the highlight of his routine, the one thing he truly looked forward to. He would catch himself checking his phone throughout the day, hoping to see a message from her. When she did text him, usually something simple like a funny observation about her day or a question about pottery techniques, his whole mood would lift. But she remained careful with boundaries. She was warm and friendly, supportive and kind, but never flirtatious. She never said or did anything that suggested she saw him as more than a friend. He couldn't tell if she felt what he felt, or if he was just projecting his own confused emotions onto their friendship. Maybe she was just being nice. Maybe he was reading too much into everything. The uncertainty was exhausting. Some days he would convince himself that she must feel something too, that the way she looked at him or laughed at his jokes meant something more. Other days he would decide he was being ridiculous, that she was just a kind person who was good at making people feel comfortable, and he was mistaking basic human decency for romantic interest. He didn't want to ruin what they had by wanting too much. The friendship itself was precious to him. She was the first person in years he had truly opened up to, the first person who made him feel like maybe he could trust again. If he admitted his feelings and she didn't feel the same way, he might lose her completely. And the thought of losing her was unbearable. 2 months after the gallery opening, his careful world was turned upside down again. It was a Thursday night, almost 2 a.m. His phone rang, jolting him awake from a restless sleep. Her name appeared on the screen. His heart immediately started racing. She had never called him this late. Something must be wrong. "Hello?" he answered, his voice rough with sleep. "Hey," she said, and he could immediately tell she was crying. "I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else to call. I'm at the hospital, in the parking garage. I just finished a double shift and I can't drive right now. What happened? Are you okay?" he asked, already getting out of bed, looking for his shoes. "I'm not hurt or anything," she said quickly. "It's just one of my patients tonight. He reminded me so much of my brother. Same age, same situation. I tried to help him, I did everything right, but he was just so sad and I couldn't fix it. And all I could think about was my brother, and how I couldn't fix him either. And now I'm sitting in my car and I can't stop crying and I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid," he said firmly, grabbing his keys. "Which hospital?" "I'm coming right now." "You don't have to do that," she protested weakly. "I know I don't have to. I want to. Tell me where you are." She gave him the location. He threw on whatever clothes he could find and drove across the city. The streets were empty at this hour, just the occasional taxi or late-night delivery truck. He made it to the hospital in record time, his hands gripping the steering wheel tight, worried about her. He found her car in the parking garage on the 3rd level. She was sitting in the driver's seat with the interior light on, her head resting on the steering wheel, shoulders shaking with sobs. He knocked gently on the window so he wouldn't startle her. She looked up, her face red and blotchy from crying, and opened the door. Without thinking about it, Without worrying about boundaries or what it might mean, he climbed into the passenger seat and just sat there beside her. "I'm a mess," she said, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I'm sorry you had to see me like this." "Don't apologize," he said quietly. "Please don't apologize for being human." She laughed, but it came out as more of a sob. "I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to be the one who helps people. I'm a psychiatric nurse. I should be able to handle this." "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said. "Not with me." They sat there in the dimly lit parking garage for almost an hour. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she talked about her patient, about her brother, about the weight of trying to save people who don't always want to be saved. Sometimes they just sat in silence and he stayed there with her, present and steady. Eventually her breathing calmed down. The tears stopped. She looked at him with exhausted red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for not trying to fix me or tell me everything will be okay or any of that stuff people usually say. I know what it's like to need someone to just be there," he replied. "You did that for me. In the parking lot after the gallery, you just listened. You didn't try to fix me." She reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact beyond that moment at the pottery studio. Her hand was warm and small in his, and holding it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I don't let people see me like this," she admitted. "I always have to be the strong one, the capable one, the one who has everything together. My parents needed me to be strong after my brother died. My patients need me to be strong. Everyone needs me to be strong. What do you need?" he asked softly. She looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. They were both people who had learned to protect themselves, both people who had built walls to keep others at a safe distance, and somehow, without either of them planning it, those walls had started to crumble. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've been strong for so long, I'm not sure I remember what I need anymore." "That's okay," he said. "We can figure it out together. If you want." It was such a simple statement, but it carried so much weight. He was offering her something he rarely offered anyone. His presence, his support, his willingness to be there even when things were messy and complicated. She squeezed his hand tighter. "I think I might want more than friendship," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out quickly like she had to say them before she lost courage. "With you. I think I've wanted that for a while now, but I've been scared to admit it." "I'm still scared to admit it." His heart stopped. Actually stopped. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she had just said. "You're not saying anything," she said, starting to pull her hand away. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Forget I said anything." "No," he said quickly, holding onto her hand. "Don't apologize. I'm shocked. I've had feelings for you for months now. I thought I was imagining that there might be something between us. I thought I was being ridiculous." She laughed then, a real laugh despite the tears still drying on her face. "You thought you were imagining it? I've been going crazy trying to figure out if you felt the same way." They looked at each other in the fluorescent light of the parking garage, both of them exhausted and emotional and vulnerable, and they started laughing. Real, genuine laughter that came from relief and surprise and the absurdity of two scared people who had both been hiding the same feelings. "So now what?" she asked when the laughter faded. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never done this before. Not in a healthy way. I don't know how to care about someone without losing myself." "I don't know how to do this either," she said. "I've kept everyone at arm's length for 5 years. I don't know how to let someone in." "Maybe we figure it out together?" he suggested. "Maybe we're scared together?" She smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Yeah," she said softly. "Maybe we can do that." They didn't kiss that night in the parking garage. They weren't ready for that yet. But they held hands and they made a promise to try, to be honest with each other, to work through their fears together, and somehow that felt even more intimate than any kiss could have been. The weeks after that night in the parking garage were strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. They had admitted their feelings to each other, but neither of them quite knew what to do with that admission. They weren't officially dating, but they weren't just friends anymore either. They existed in this uncertain space between, both of them too scared to fully commit but too drawn to each other to pull away. They still went to pottery class every Tuesday. They still texted throughout the week. But now there was a new awareness between them, an electric tension that hadn't been there before. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the pottery studio and they would both quickly look away, smiling like teenagers with a secret. About a month after their conversation in the parking garage, she mentioned wanting to see the wildflowers in the mountains. Spring had arrived and the meadows were supposedly covered in beautiful blooms. It was a casual comment, just an offhand remark about something she'd seen on social media. "I could take you," he offered before he could overthink it. "I mean, if you want." "I have a car." "We could make a day of it. Go hiking, see the flowers." She looked at him with surprise and then smiled. "Really? You'd want to do that?" "Yeah," he said, trying to sound casual even though his heart was racing. "It sounds nice." They planned it for the following Saturday. He spent the entire week alternating between excitement and panic. This felt like a date. It felt like a real official date. What if he messed it up? What if the whole day was awkward? What if he said something stupid or did something wrong? Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. Clear blue sky, warm sun. Just enough breeze to keep it comfortable. He picked her up from her apartment, and they drove toward the mountains with the windows down and music playing softly on the radio. The conversation flowed easily, like it always did with her. She told him stories about difficult patients at the hospital. He told her about a frustrating project at work. They stopped for coffee at a small roadside cafe and shared a cinnamon roll that was bigger than both their heads. The hiking trail was moderately crowded, with other people who had the same idea about seeing the wildflowers. But once they got deeper into the mountains, the crowds thinned out. They hiked through meadows absolutely covered in purple and yellow and red flowers. So many flowers it almost didn't look real. She kept stopping to take photos with her phone, trying to capture the beauty of it all. He took photos too, but mostly of her taking photos. The way her face lit up with joy, the way she laughed when the breeze messed up her hair. They found a spot by a small alpine lake for lunch. He had packed sandwiches and fruit and chips, feeling proud of himself for thinking ahead. They sat on a flat rock by the water's edge, eating and talking and watching the sunlight sparkle on the lake's surface. "This is perfect," she said, looking out at the view. "Thank you for bringing me here." "Thank you for coming with me," he replied. She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and something in her expression made his breath catch. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. What are we doing?" she asked softly. "I mean, I know we both said we have feelings for each other, but we haven't really talked about what that means. Are we dating? Are we still just friends? I don't know what to call this." The question hung in the air between them. This was it. This was the moment where he had to decide if he was brave enough to really try. But instead of answering, he felt the familiar anxiety rising in his chest. His thoughts started spiraling. What if he said the wrong thing? What if he wanted this too much and scared her away? What if he let himself be vulnerable and got hurt again? What if she realized he was too damaged, too broken, too much work? He stood up abruptly. "We should probably start heading back. It's a long hike down." She looked confused and hurt. "Okay," she said quietly, starting to pack up the lunch remains. They hiked back in near silence. The easy conversation from earlier was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable tension. He could feel her glancing at him, could sense her trying to figure out what had happened, but he couldn't explain it even to himself. By the time they reached the car, the sun was starting to set. The drive back was painful. She stared out the window while he gripped the steering wheel, angry at himself for ruining everything. About halfway home, she finally spoke. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "That thing where you disappear while still being physically present. Where you shut down and go somewhere I can't reach you." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Talk to me, please." "I don't know what to say," he said, his voice tight. "Then let's pull over and figure it out. Because I can't do this if you're going to run away every time things get real." He pulled into a scenic overlook that was empty at this hour. He turned off the engine and they sat there in the dimming light, the mountains stretching out before them. "I'm scared," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm terrified, actually." "Of what?" she asked, turning in her seat to face him. And then it all came pouring out, all the fears he'd been holding inside. He told her he didn't know how to be in a relationship without losing himself. He told her he was afraid of wanting too much, of being too needy, of repeating the same patterns from his past. He told her he was scared that his damage was too much for anyone to handle, that eventually she would realize he was too broken and leave. "I have feelings for you," he said, his voice shaking. Real feelings. The kind that terrify me because I don't know how to have them in a healthy way. I don't know how to want someone without it becoming toxic. I don't know how to be vulnerable without getting destroyed. And I'm so afraid of messing this up, of hurting you or getting hurt myself, that I keep running away. Even though running away is the last thing I actually want to do. She listened to everything without interrupting. When he finally finished, when there were no more words left, she reached over and took his hand. I'm scared too, she said softly. I've been scared since the moment I realized I had feelings for you. Do you know why I became so good at keeping people at a distance? Because after my brother died, I decided it was safer not to care too much. I threw myself into work, into helping other people because it let me care without really letting anyone in. You're the first person in 5 years who has made me want to let someone in, and that terrifies me. She squeezed his hand tighter. I don't know what this becomes. I don't know if we'll be good at this or if we'll mess it up completely. I don't have any guarantees to give you. But I know I want to try. I want to try with you, even though it scares me. Maybe especially because it scares me. He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, he could see tears in her eyes that matched the ones in his. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. I don't either, she replied. But maybe we can figure it out together. Maybe we can be scared together and try anyway. Something broke open inside him then. Some wall he'd been holding up for years finally crumbled. He leaned over the center console and she met him halfway, and they kissed as the sun set over the mountains. It wasn't a perfect kiss from a movie. It was awkward and clumsy, and their teeth bumped together at first. But it was real and honest and full of all the fear and hope and possibility they both felt. When they pulled apart, they were both crying and laughing at the same time. So is this a yes? She asked, smiling through her tears. Are we doing this? Are we actually trying? He nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. Then he found his voice. Yes, let's try. Let's be scared together. They sat in that overlook for another hour, talking about what they both needed, what their fears were, how they could support each other. They talked about boundaries and communication and the importance of honesty even when it was hard. It wasn't a fairy tale moment. It was messy and emotional and vulnerable, but it was real. And for both of them, that was exactly what they needed. The year that followed wasn't easy. Movies and songs make it seem like love fixes everything. That once two people admit their feelings, everything falls into place. But real life doesn't work that way. Real relationships, especially between two people carrying their own wounds, take work. They take patience and understanding and a whole lot of difficult conversations. In the beginning, they were happy just being together. They went on actual dates now. Nothing fancy. Just dinner at casual restaurants or walks in the park or movie nights at his apartment. They held hands in public. They kissed goodnight. They called each other boyfriend and girlfriend. And every time he said those words, he felt a mix of joy and terror. But old patterns die hard. About 3 months into their relationship, the first real problem appeared. She had been working a lot of extra shifts at the hospital. Dealing with a particularly difficult case, she became quiet, distant, spending more time alone. When he would text her, her responses were short. When they were together, she seemed far away, lost in her own thoughts. His old anxiety came roaring back. She was pulling away. She was losing interest. She had realized he was too much work and was looking for a way out. She probably regretted getting involved with someone as damaged as him. These thoughts circled his mind constantly, growing louder each day. Instead of talking to her about it, he started pulling away too. If she was going to leave eventually, maybe it was better to protect himself now. He stopped reaching out as much. He made excuses when she suggested getting together. He built his walls back up brick by brick. One evening, she showed up at his apartment unannounced. He opened the door to find her standing there looking frustrated and hurt. "What are we doing?" she asked, walking past him into his living room. "You've been avoiding me for 2 weeks. If you want to break up, just say it. Don't make me guess." "I'm not avoiding you," he lied, closing the door. "Yes, you are. And I need to know why. Did I do something wrong? Did something happen?" He wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, to protect himself with casual excuses, but he remembered their promise to each other in that mountain overlook. To be honest, even when it was hard. "You've been distant," he said finally. "You've been pulling away, working all the time, barely responding to my messages. I figured you were losing interest, so I started pulling back too, to protect myself. She stared at him for a long moment, and then she did something unexpected. She started laughing. Not mean laughter, but the kind of laugh that comes from frustration and relief mixed together. I've been distant because I've been struggling, she said, sitting down on his couch. One of my patients reminds me so much of my brother, and it's been bringing up all this grief I thought I'd dealt with. I've been quiet because I've been sad, not because I'm losing interest in you. I needed some space to process my feelings, but I should have told you that instead of just disappearing. He sat down beside her, feeling foolish. I should have just asked you instead of assuming the worst. Yeah, you should have, she agreed. And I should have communicated better instead of shutting you out. That night they had their first real conversation about what they needed from each other. She explained that sometimes she needed space when she was processing difficult emotions, but that didn't mean she was pulling away from him. He explained that he needed reassurance sometimes, needed to hear that she still wanted to be with him, because his past made it hard to trust that good things could last. They decided to try therapy, not because their relationship was failing, but because they wanted to learn how to do it right. Some of their friends thought it was strange to go to couples counseling so early in a relationship, but for them, it made perfect sense. They were two people with complicated pasts trying to build something healthy, and they needed help learning how. Their therapist taught them about communication styles and triggers. She helped him understand that not everyone who needs space is abandoning him. She helped her understand that being vulnerable about her needs wasn't a burden. It was necessary. They learned to recognize when old wounds were affecting present situations. The work was hard, but it was worth it. Slowly, they got better at it. He learned to ask for reassurance when he needed it instead of spiraling into anxiety. She learned to tell him when she needed space instead of just withdrawing. They celebrated small victories, like the first time he voiced a need without apologizing for it, or the first time she cried in front of him without immediately trying to pull herself together. They had arguments, real ones, where they disagreed and got frustrated with each other, but they learned how to fight fair, how to take breaks when things got too heated, how to come back together and work through problems instead of running away. The first time they had a real fight and then resolved it without either person shutting down or leaving, they both cried with relief. They could disagree and still be okay. They could have conflict without everything falling apart. His family started calling again. She encouraged him to reconnect with them, even drove him to his parents' house the first time because he was too nervous to go alone. His old friends, the ones he'd lost touch with during his previous relationship, slowly came back into his life. She never got jealous or tried to control who he spent time with. She wanted him to have a full life, wanted him to be connected to people who cared about him. She introduced him to her parents too, which was emotional and difficult because it meant visiting the house where her brother had grown up, seeing his photos on the walls. But he held her hand through it, met her family, listened to stories about the brother he would never meet. Her parents liked him, told her privately that they were glad she was letting someone in again. 1 year after their first kiss in that mountain overlook, they went back to the same spot. It was her idea, a way to mark the anniversary of when they decided to try being together despite their fears. They hiked the same trail, saw the same wildflowers, sat by the same alpine lake, but everything felt different now. Not because the feelings had faded, but because they had grown into something deeper and more stable. The anxiety was still there sometimes. The old fears still surfaced, but they had learned how to face them together. As they sat by the lake, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a small box. Inside were 2 handmade ceramic pieces, small and imperfect and beautiful. She had made them in pottery class over the past few months, working on them during the Tuesday evenings they still attended together. I made these for us, she said, handing him one. They're not perfect. They have cracks and rough edges and weird spots where the glaze didn't take right, but that's what makes them ours. We're not perfect either. We're still figuring things out. We still mess up and have bad days and struggle with our pasts, but we're doing it together, and that's what matters. He held the ceramic piece in his hand, turning it over, seeing all its imperfections. It was lumpy and uneven. The glaze was streaky in places, and there was a small crack running along one side. It was absolutely perfect. You're trembling, she said softly, the same words she'd spoken over a year ago in the pottery studio. He looked at her and smiled, tears in his eyes. It's not fear, he said. Not anymore. It's gratitude. It's joy. It's this overwhelming feeling that I found something real with someone who sees all my broken pieces and stays anyway. She moved closer to him, and he wrapped his arms around her. They sat there by the lake, holding each other, two imperfect people who had been brave enough to try. Later, as they hiked back down the mountain, hands intertwined, he thought about how far they'd both come. A year ago, the idea of being in a healthy relationship seemed impossible. The idea that someone could know all his damage and still choose him seemed like a fantasy. But here he was, walking down a mountain with someone who loved him not despite his flaws, but as a whole person who included those flaws. The trembling still came sometimes. Fear had a way of resurfacing when you'd been hurt before, but now when he trembled, she was there to steady him. And when she trembled, he was there for her. They had learned that healing wasn't about becoming perfect or erasing the past. It was about finding someone willing to hold your hand while you shook, someone brave enough to shake with you. They reached the parking lot as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Before getting in the car, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For being scared with me. For staying even when it was hard. For being patient while we figured this out. For choosing me every day, even on the days when it wasn't easy." He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for choosing me too. For seeing me, really seeing me, and not running away." They drove home together as darkness fell, talking about what to have for dinner, whether they should stop for ice cream, normal everyday things that somehow felt extraordinary. Because they had built this, two broken people had found each other and decided to try. And somehow, against all odds, they had created something real and beautiful and lasting. The ceramic pieces she'd made sat carefully wrapped in his backpack. Imperfect, flawed, but absolutely precious. Just like them, just like what they'd built together. And that was more than enough.